Hello, my Psychians. So let's get started. So our first category is anxiety disorders. And just a little quick, and so anxiety, I put, again, I'm trying to, I believe anxiety is in blue. So I color coded the disorder. So as we go through, you can kind of see the background of the colors of my slide so you can see what it goes to. I would highly recommend drawing. So this is the old DSM-4 where anxiety actually was covered within generalized anxiety disorder, panic phobias, obsessive compulsive, and PTSD. But with the new DSM-5, they separated obsessive compulsive and PTSD into their own categories. So I would draw kind of how anxiety is under the umbrella of anxiety is the generalized anxiety disorder, panic, and phobias. But when we move to obsessive compulsive, which will be in our second half of our module video, those are separate. Same with PTSD. Again, the DSM-5 is always changing. These were some new aspects. So let's get started. So first things first, anxiety disorders. What is anxiety? Some general qualities of anxiety are excessive worrying, fear, apprehension, intrusive thoughts, physical symptoms, along with feelings of tension. And when we talk about physical symptoms, people may experience stomach aches, nausea, so physical reactions to anxiety. And it seems to have an automatic quality that comes from within the person, like a knee-jerk, uncontrollable reaction. But I want to clarify something with you real quick. Anxiety is normal to have. If you are experiencing anxiety over a test you have next week, over an event that you have to talk at, those are normal feelings of anxiety. It's called acute anxiety, so it's short-lived anxiety. That is normal. It is not considered a disorder. In your notes, I want you to write, if it is prolonged, which there's no reason for you to feel anxious, that is when it starts to fall under the disorder aspect, okay? And again, within our anxiety disorders, we'll be going over generalized anxiety disorder, phobia disorder, right? And panic disorder. That's the P right there. Panic, phobia and panic, right? Okay. So according to the DSM-5 criteria, this is how they view it. And I would like you to write all these down. So this is generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, and how the DSM criteria looks is this. It's summarized as having excessive anxiety and worry occurring more days than not for at least 6 months, okay? When it comes to diagnosing people, it has to be over a span of time, okay? If someone comes in and walks in and says, I have this, and they're like, okay, let's diagnose you. Wrong. It takes time, okay? It takes time. 2, they're unable to control their worry. There is they can't find what the exact worry is about. And 3, they display at least 3 of the following 6 symptoms: restlessness, fatigue, irritability, difficulty concentrating, muscle tension, and sleep disturbances. So generalized anxiety disorder actually goes quite hand in hand with insomnia. People who have a hard time turning off their brains at nighttime, right? Have a hard time turning off their brains. And again, I just have my notes on the side, just making sure I'm going through each stage. Okay, so that is for anxiety disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, GAD. So now we're moving on to the next portion underneath our anxiety disorder, and this is panic disorder. Okay, panic disorder. It is characterized by a reoccurrent and unexpected panic attacks. Panic disorder, okay? A panic attack is a specific period of intense fear or discomfort in which 4 or more of the following are shown, and it reaches a peak within 10 minutes. Palpitations, sweating, trembling, sensation of shortness of breath, feeling of choking that they cannot breathe, nausea, stomach discomfort, feeling dizzy, lightheaded, faint, derealization where it's almost like you don't even know where you're at right now, right? Fear of losing control, fear of dying. And then also, there's also a numbness and a tingling sensation that can also accompany your panic attack, or when we talk about panic disorder, in chills, along with being like your temperature, your homeostasis is off. So again, what is categorized as a panic attack is any of these four following an abrupt reach of a peak, and then it goes. So panic attacks usually last between 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, they're very up and then down, right? And they're very scary, right? Panic attacks can happen. They can be triggered by an environment all the time, right? Especially if you have a very unstable temperament, right? So emotional reactivity. And when we talk about, so now we're moving on to phobias. So now we're still under anxiety disorder, right? But now we're going on to phobias, okay? So phobias are an anxiety disorder that is marked by a persistent and irrational fear, usually of something, right? I am not a fan of needles. I wouldn't say that it's a phobia because I can still talk myself down, and I may have a few symptoms, but again, there's kind of a spectrum, right? So the DSM5 criteria for phobias is this: 1, fear that is excessive and unreasonable and is cued by an anticipation or presence of the fear of the stimuli, okay? 2, exposure to the stimuli provokes an immediate anxiety response, So for example, when I think of needles, I immediately my palms get super sweaty, I start to sweat, and I can't control it, right? And then number 3, person recognizes fear as excessive and unreasonable, but they cannot stop it. So people who have phobias know, like for me, when I was getting, my COVID vaccine, I was like, I know I'm going to be okay. Like I know this, but they cannot help it. Okay. It's an immediate reaction within the body. And this is phobias continued. So some more phobia criteria. Number 4, phobic situation is avoided or endured with intense anxiety. So people who are diagnosed with phobias, they tend to avoid it in everyday life. So for example, someone who has a phobia of heights might avoid elevators or escalators, because remember, that creates dysfunction and it creates a difference in their lifestyles, right? So when we go back to our 3 Ds of, being diagnosable, right? 5 is avoidance of phobias that interfere with normal daily routine. So if someone has a phobia of, closed spaces and they can't even be in an office, right? That is dysfunctional, right? That's a dysfunctional aspect. If people are trying to be diagnosed under the age of 18, this has to be persistent and present for at least 6 months. Again, 6 months is a really good timeline for a lot of these disorders in order to be diagnosed, right? Because we have to be able to watch over time. And phobia is not accounted for by any other anxiety disorder. So a phobia disorder it cannot be from a extension from a depressive disorder or a bipolar disorder, right? It has to be for itself. It cannot be from a reaction of a medication or anything else in that aspect, okay? So that is phobias. And again, so anxiety is in the blue. So I created like the blue sides for anxiety. So that's why I dubbed anxiety blue. And, just a little bit more into phobias. It's marked again as a persistent and irrational fear of an object or situation that disrupts behavior. And some common phobias are being alone, storms or weather, right? Uncontrollable weather, closed spaces, flying, people. Oh my gosh, when I see blood, I get like a little queasy. Ugh! But it's not phobia, right? Because I can deal with it. Heights, animals, right? So people with phobias know exactly what they're afraid of, but the fears are outproportioned by reality, right? So it's beyond their voluntary control, right? That's when it becomes a disorder. It's when they cannot cope and it's becoming distressful. And just a few of kind of the 3 main types of phobia. There's the specific phobia, which is a fear of a particular object. There is lots of phobias. You can be afraid of a pencil. You can be afraid of lights. I mean, I'm talking, my friends, specific phobias. Look them up. There is a lot of names for a lot of phobias I didn't even realize were phobias, or could be phobias. So those are called specific phobias. Those are very, very almost like the dominant one. Social phobia is the fear of embarrassment interacting with others. Social phobia tends to be a branch of social anxiety. Okay, social anxiety, people who are anxious within social settings. Okay, social settings. And you know what's interesting? With this whole COVID lockdown and social isolation, I think social phobias are going to have a little uptick because even me just going to a crowded grocery store, I start to get like, oh my gosh, there's so many people and I'm not used to seeing all these people, right? And then we have agoraphobia, which is a fear of entering certain fear-evoking situations which often accompany panic attacks. So they avoid crowds where attacks could occur. So agoraphobia is also a pretty dominant in the phobia aspects. So again, write these down. These are the three kinds of phobias that kind of dominate the realm. And that's it for our first anxiety presentation, along with our generalized anxiety, our panic, and our phobias. Okay, and we'll move on to our next portion of this module.